This is Midrash Tanchuma, Parshat Vayeshev, entitled, Did God Weave Discord into the Coat of Many Colors?
The Midrash does something astounding here. It retells the story of Yosef and his brothers, the sale of Yosef, in a completely different way than we might have learned it in third grade. It says, you know what really happened here? Very simple. God put an extra special love for Yosef in the heart of Yaakov in order to make the brothers jealous, in order that they sell Yosef into slavery, in order that Yaakov and his sons come down to Egypt. In fact, it says, Vayurad, means that you have to read the pasuk differently. It's not that Yaakov, that Yosef was taken down to Egypt, that he was actually drawing his father, because his father would only come to Egypt if the circumstances were that he thought his son was dead, and he found out he was still alive, and he was so excited to see him, he went down to Egypt. That was God's plan. I need to get Yaakov down to Egypt, and so I manipulated events. That's actually what the word, how it's described in the Midrash. It says, Ve'evi alila l'chol dvarim elu. God manipulated events in order to get the Jewish people down to Egypt. So there are a bunch of theological questions here. It almost sounds like the brothers had no free will. They had to sell their brother in order to get to God's purpose. Also, we know from many other sources that it was a terrible sin that they committed, yet it sounds here like they had to do it. And that third question, as we mentioned, does God really manipulate events? So I was looking for another medrash which used the same word, alilah, and I found a very interesting medrash in Esther Rabbah. There the story is told that there was an argument going on between Achashverosh and Haman. Haman, of course, wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and Achashverosh is saying, this is really a bad idea. Look at history, look at Paro, look at Ashur. You can't start up with the Jewish God. And Haman kept saying, no, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. So Achashverosh wasn't convinced. He brought in the wise men and the Chachamim and the Chartumim, the fortune tellers, soothsayers, whatever they were, and they also argued against Haman. They said, there's a problem here. The world was created for the Jewish people. If you destroy the Jewish people, there's no reason for the world to exist. And they also said that you can't win. God rules in the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And Haman came back with an argument that seemed to win the day. He said, look what happened with Nebuchadnezzar not that long ago. He destroyed the temple. He exiled the Jews. Why was he able to do that? Why was he able to succeed? Obviously, God didn't have the power. I hear what you're saying. There was a time that God had power, but now he doesn't have the power anymore. Maybe he got old, weaker. Don't worry about it. Well, that argument they accepted. And right away they got to writing a letter to the other nations of the world, as it's described in the Megillah, and they were going to tell everybody why we have to destroy the Jews. And what's the main reason? Because the Jews committed an alilah, the same word that we were trying to define. What was the manipulation, the alilah that they committed? Well, the way Haman told the story is that there was a great famine, and Yaakov and his brothers came down to Egypt, and they were welcomed with open arms. They were given a special land, the best land. They were given food and sustenance. And you'd think they would be grateful. No. What did the Jews do? They one day announced that they're going to worship their God for 3 days in the desert, and they asked all the Egyptians to give them gold and silver, clothing and animals, and they basically embezzled that. They had no intention of coming back. So of course, Paro had to try to pursue them. That's his job. But there was a guy named Moshe who knew witchcraft. He had a wand, and everybody drowned. They were not able to retrieve all the stolen money. But you see how the Jews really use alilah. They use manipulation. That's why we have to destroy them. And the letter goes on to describe how wonderful people called Amalek who were innocently slaughtered. Okay, so how is this word used in this medrash? basically the same way. Alilah means manipulation, although, interesting, it's sort of manipulation as told by a master manipulator, right? Haman almost sounds like the newspapers we read today. He left out, conveniently, the fact that the Jews were enslaved. He left out that Yosef saved the entire world from starvation. Okay. So let's get back to our case. How are we going to solve our issues at hand? So I would start to be bothered a little bit, or start to think about this idea that, was there any bit of a lie in what actually Moshe told Paro, that we are just going to worship for 3 days? Is there anything false about that? Obviously, we were not coming back. So I saw in the Orach Chaim a beautiful answer. The Orach Chaim said, yes, that was a manipulation. Why? Because God punishes by way of midah k'neged midah. Right? God always wants his punishment to be instructive, and so he wanted to manipulate the Egyptians because they manipulated the Jews. That's how the Jews got enslaved. They were told under false pretenses to help out, and slowly but surely they were enslaved. It was all manipulation. So God wants to be instructive, and God used the same manipulation against them. Beautiful. That to me sort of opened the door in explaining the difficulties in our Midrash. How so? Well, if you look at our story, the brothers, for example, had what we call in Hebrew, nisayon, right? They were being tested. What was their character trait that God was sort of stress testing? It was jealousy. In other words, think about it. When Yosef came with his dream, they could have said, what a guy, he's immature, he's got a great imagination. Nonsense, who cares what he said? No, it caused tremendous rage and jealousy. So that was something they were tested on. God tests us on our moral failings. They flunked the test. But what happened? They were punished. Midah k'neged midah, just like the Orach Chaim said, right? They were enraged about the idea that they have to bow down to Yosef. Guess what? They did bow down to Yosef. They stood by while Shimon threw Yosef in the pit. Guess what? They had to stand by while Yosef threw Shimon in jail. So they were punished. But they took a lesson from it. They did tshuva. They grew from it spiritually. How do we know that? Because it says in the Pasuk, Vayomer ish el achav, aval hashemim anachnu. We are guilty. Alachinu asher ra'inu tzara nafsho, bischanano elenu, velo shamanu, akein bar leno atzara azot. Right? We stood by and we saw the suffering of our brother, and that's why we're being punished. So they figured it out, and the midah k'neged midah worked perfectly. They grew from it. They grew from their past misdeeds. That's what life is all about. Same thing with Yosef. Yosef also was tested, right? Yosef was given this great talent of able to interpret dreams, but the talent came with responsibility, and they didn't do that correctly. They didn't exercise his responsibility correctly, because he could have come to his father and said, I had this dream about everybody bowing down to me. I don't want to say it out loud to my brothers. It's certainly going to, it's going to aggravate them. No. He bragged about it. So what happened to him? Midah k'neged midah. He was thrown in a pit and thrown in jail. Did he learn the lesson? Yes, he did. He saw the greater picture. We see that he said to his brothers, Ata al tatzvu al yichar beinechem ki mechatem osihena ki l'mechyash lachnu lekim lefnecha. I see the whole big picture. My role in Jewish destiny was to make sure to feed the whole world and to make sure and feed my own family during this great famine that's threatening the whole world. So again, midah k'neged midah. He stumbled. He got the message. He grew spiritually from it. That's what's supposed to happen. So what's emerging here is a picture that God is simultaneously has a goal. Jewish destiny has a goal that the Jewish people have to come down to Egypt, and eventually they're going to be freed from Egypt and get the Torah and go to Israel. Their Jewish destiny has to unfold. But at the same time, while God is making sure that destiny unfolds, he's also stress testing the moral weaknesses of the players, Yosef and his brothers. God can do both simultaneously. So when we go back to our original questions, did the brothers have free will? Of course they had free will. Did they sin? Yes, of course they sinned. It was a test for them. Why did the Midrash use this unusual term, alilah, manipulation? I think the point of the Midrash is that we, in our limitations, our intellectual limitations as human beings, we look at the world around us and it seems like we're pawns. We don't have, what choice do we have? What's happening? Why are what are all these things going on in our life? Actually, they're a series of tests. That's what life is. It's a series of tests. It's an opportunity. God choreographs an opportunity for us to grow from what happens to us, grow from our experiences. So that's why the word alilah is used. From our limited perspective, it seems like an alilah, a manipulation. But it's really a very important point that the Midrash is making about how God runs the world. Have a great Shabbos.